For more than a decade, one name was basically the only name when you thought of mobile phones. It was a brand that connected billions of people, gave us that iconic ringtone, and, let's be honest, built phones so tough they became an internet meme. This is the story of Nokia.
I mean, think about it. If you're of a certain age, chances are your very first phone was a Nokia. You probably spent way too many hours playing Snake and getting ridiculously fast at T9 texting. They were the undisputed kings. So how on earth did a company at the absolute peak of its power just fall apart so fast?
To really understand the fall, you first have to appreciate the absolutely staggering height of their success. And believe it or not, this story doesn't start with phones. It starts with a paper mill, of all things.
Yeah, that's right, a paper mill from 1865. For 100 years, they made stuff like rubber boots and car tires. But then in the 80s, they made a hard pivot into electronics. And wow, did it pay off. By 1998, they'd blown past Motorola and become the biggest mobile phone brand on the entire planet. And when I say dominant, I mean a level of control that's almost impossible to even imagine in today's market. Let me just throw some numbers at you, because they're pretty wild. So in 2007, right as the smartphone era was dawning, Nokia had almost half of the entire global smartphone market. Think about that. One company selling basically every other smartphone in the world. And get this, if you look at a list of the best-selling mobile phones of all time, 7 of the top 10 were made by Nokia. That includes the legendary 3310 and, of course, the #1 bestseller to this day, the little Nokia 1100. This is just mind-blowing. In their best year, 2008, Nokia sold 472 million phones. To put that in perspective, that's more than Apple and Samsung sold combined a full decade later. They weren't just a company, they were an unstoppable force of nature.
But here's the thing. While Nokia was celebrating its best year ever, the seeds of its own destruction were already sprouting. Because just 1 year earlier, a guy on a stage had completely changed the game. The iPhone wasn't just another new phone. It was a totally different idea of what a phone could even be. And Nokia, tragically, just didn't get it. Their entire philosophy, everything that made them successful, was about to become obsolete.
And this slide really nails the problem, doesn't it? It was a fundamental clash. Nokia was a hardware company. They were obsessed with building indestructible phones with batteries that lasted for days. But Apple knew the future wasn't about the plastic box. It was about the software inside that box and the whole ecosystem you build around it. So yeah, the iPhone was the big, scary monster outside the door. But honestly, Nokia's biggest enemy was itself. The company had become so big, so successful, that it was just too slow and too blind to what was happening. This right here, this was Nokia's massive blind spot. They were amazing at making devices, but they totally missed the boat on apps. Apple and Google were out there building these huge armies of developers, all creating cool experiences for their phones. Meanwhile, Nokia's operating system, Symbian, was clunky and just a pain to develop for. It fell behind fast. Internally, oh man, it was a mess. They just assumed their brand name was invincible. You had middle managers who were literally afraid to tell the executives how bad things were getting. And those same execs didn't really have the software background to see how far behind they were. They were a giant, completely frozen in place. So by 2011, the alarm bells were screaming. The leadership finally woke up and realized they were in catastrophic trouble. This led their new CEO, Stephen Elop, to send one of the most famous and desperate memos in corporate history. He told all his employees they were standing on a burning oil platform. Behind them was the fire of their failing business. Ahead of them was the cold, dark, unknown ocean. They had no choice. They had to jump. And that jump, it led to this absolutely fateful choice. Okay, so they knew Symbian was dead. They thought about Android, which seems like the obvious move, but they were scared of just becoming another company like Samsung, lost in the crowd. So, in this desperate attempt to be different, they said no to Android and bet the entire company on a partnership with Microsoft and its totally unproven Windows Phone. This Microsoft deal was supposed to be their lifeboat. Instead, it was the final fatal blow. They hadn't jumped to safety. They've jumped from a burning platform straight into the freezing cold water. I mean, just look at these numbers. By 2013, the war was over. Android and iOS controlled 97% of the market.
That third ecosystem that Nokia bet everything on, it was a rounding error. It had completely failed to get anyone, developers or customers, on board. With the company just collapsing, Microsoft stepped in and bought Nokia's entire phone business in 2014 for over $7 billion. You'd think that was the end of the sad story? But here's the kicker, the truly insane part of this whole thing. Just 1 year later, Microsoft basically admitted the whole thing was a catastrophic failure. They wrote off $7.6 billion, that's more than they even paid for it, and laid off thousands of those former Nokia employees. Just an absolute disaster. It really is one of the most stunning collapses in business history. A company that did so much right for so long, and then just completely missed the future. So what can we learn from all this? This quote from a really emotional press conference, it says it all, doesn't it? From their point of view, they were still making great, durable phones. They just didn't see that the rules of the game had totally changed. The world shifted from what a phone is to what a phone does.
Now, the story isn't all tragedy. The Nokia company is still around, and it's a huge player in things like network equipment and 5G technology. They basically went back to their roots of building the complicated tech behind the scenes and got out of the consumer phone game. And that leaves us with one last really crucial question. The story of Nokia is this powerful, powerful lesson about how success can make you complacent and blind you to change. It makes you wonder, which of today's dominant, invincible companies might be making those exact same mistakes right now?